Putin will never say absolutely no. He will always I suspect he will find a way to string out the negotiations, come up with new conditions, say yes, but, because Putin doesn't want to say no directly to Trump. The question is whether Trump will figure out, and how long it will take him to figure out, that Putin is the obstacle to peace and Zelenskyy is not. And if Trump figures that out, and the sooner the better in my view, the greater the odds that Trump puts pressure on Russia, and without additional pressure, there will be no deal. But with additional pressure, some kind of a deal is possible.
Daniel, we know that President Zelenskyy is about to meet with President Trump and European leaders in the United States to discuss a peace plan. Zelenskyy has unveiled a 20-point plan recently. I studied it, and I don't have any shred of doubt that Russia will reject it. First of all, because Russia will never accept any efficient security guarantees which prevent the next Russian aggression. The second, Russia will never accept the situation when Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions are not under Russian control, because Russia has included these regions in its constitution. And I don't understand why Russia should share control of nuclear plant with Ukraine and United States. What do you think about it?
I have not seen the full text of the 20-point plan. I have seen President Zelenskyy's characterization of it. And I hope that it is, well, it seems to be better than the original 28-point plan, certainly. And I agree with you that Putin will not accept it. In fact, I would go farther and say that whatever plan is presented to him, Putin will demand more. No matter what is in the plan, he will demand more. Therefore, we are not going to get to a negotiated solution without some kind of diplomatic showdown with Putin. And in my view, that showdown ought to be about a better, not a weaker plan, since a showdown is going to be inevitable. The key, of course, to any plan is Ukrainian security. And the other major issue is the location of the ceasefire line. And I think that President Trump was right when he said that the ceasefire line should be at the current front line, not different. We'll see what happens. I think that a demilitarized zone could work, but President Zelenskyy is right that it should be not simply the Ukrainians retreating. The Russians should retreat as well, and the demilitarized zone should comprise areas which the Ukrainian and Russian armed forces have both withdrawn from, and that should be filled with monitors, so that Russia will not be able to cheat and blame the Ukrainians. Anyway, much depends on the discussions on Sunday in Florida, and I think President Zelenskyy is prepared to do a good job convincing Trump that Zelenskyy is for peace and Putin is not.
How you predict outcome of this meeting in Florida?
I have no idea. I hope that President Zelenskyy finds a way to accept Trump's proposals wherever he can, and to convince Trump that in certain areas, like the location of the ceasefire line, it's important that the US not be pushed around by Russia. But I don't know what will happen. I think that President Zelenskyy has handled Trump well, having learned the lessons of the tactically disastrous February 28th meeting in the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how could events develop further in terms of peace plan and peace negotiations? I mean, if Trump realizes that his peace plan fails, what will he do?
Well, this is interesting. Putin will never say absolutely no. He will always I suspect he will find a way to string out the negotiations, come up with new conditions, say yes, but, because Putin doesn't want to say no directly to Trump. The question is whether Trump will figure out, and how long it will take him to figure out, that Putin is the obstacle to peace and Zelenskyy is not. And if Trump figures that out, and the sooner the better in my view, the greater the odds that Trump puts pressure on Russia, and without additional pressure, there will be no deal. But with additional pressure, some kind of a deal is possible. I don't think it is a fool's errand. I don't think it's impossible to cut a deal with Russia, but it has to be done without illusions and from a position of relative strength.
How does internal political factor influence Trump's decisions? I'm talking about midterm election, first of all, and also in general, what has the biggest impact on Trump's decision in terms of Ukraine right now?
Well, Trump does face pushback from his own party. The Republicans in Congress generally support Ukraine. There are some who don't, but most of them do. Moreover, within the Republican Party and even within the MAGA movement, Trump's political movement, a majority of voters support Ukraine. And Trump has to keep his eye on the reality that his supporters are not where the anti-Ukraine circle around him is. His supporters still back Ukraine. And Trump is aware of this. Trump also wants to be seen as a winner. Trump wants to be vindicated. He wants to be right. He wants to be seen as having been right all along. Well, the only way he can do that is by delivering a good deal. If he delivers Ukraine to Russia, if he stabs Ukraine in the back or does a dirty deal over the heads of the Ukrainians and the Europeans, he will be seen as a sucker. And I think he is aware of that on some level. We will see. I can't make a prediction, but American politics tends to bend the decision curve in Trump world in the right direction, at least for now.
How should we build transatlantic cooperation to protect Ukraine efficiently? What should be the core elements of a robust transatlantic security architecture to deter aggression, assure alliance cohesion, and maintain credible defense and deterrence across Europe, including cyber, space, and conventional domains?
Well, I certainly would favor Ukrainian membership in NATO. That is the best security arrangement for Ukraine. At the moment, that's not possible because the US is opposed, as well as some other NATO members like Hungary and Slovakia. Short of that, a European coalition with the backing of the United States, plus a strong, well-supplied Ukrainian military is the second best option. And that kind of security architecture may be approaching, that may be crystallizing before us. The Europeans are willing to do a lot, but they want American backing. Now, there have been some detailed discussions, and General Grinkiewicz, the US head of SACEUR, has participated in some of them. And by all accounts I have heard, he has played a constructive role. You want military people, US senior military people involved in these discussions. But I think a defense of Ukraine is more possible than I thought 15 years ago. That is, the Ukrainian military will have to do the fighting on the ground. But Europeans could supply air defense, logistics, and the US could supply air cover from planes based in Romania and Poland, as well as backup for European forces, air defense forces inside Ukraine. The Russians will hate this, of course, but they will hate a great many things, and we should not allow Russian objections to deter us. At some point, as I said earlier, we will have to have a diplomatic showdown with Russia, and we might as well do it on behalf of a good deal rather than a weak deal, because the showdown will happen in any event.
Putin openly says that he is ready for the war with Europe. I have a question. Is Europe ready for war with Russia? Your opinion?
My opinion is Putin is threatening Europe because he thinks it is politically advantageous to Russia to do so. I think that aggression against Europe is already underway. That is, there is Russian sabotage, drone overflights in Europe over NATO members, not just Moldova and of course Ukraine. Whether Putin would launch an attack on a NATO member, I can't say, but it is possible that he could launch a campaign of intense sabotage, let's say in Estonia or Eastern Latvia, and send over little green men to do damage and test the West's response. Now, I think that he would be ill-advised if he is counting on Estonia or Latvia to sit passively. I was in Tallinn at a conference when someone asked the Estonian defense minister what Estonia would do if little green men appeared in Narva, and his answer was short and good. Shoot them, was his answer, which means if Russia tried this, you would not find paralysis among the Baltic governments, you would find decisive action. Putin is trying to intimidate the West. We need not to be intimidated. Whether the West is fully prepared to deal with Russian aggression, I can't say. It's safe to say that they need to do more, and they need to learn from Ukraine in particular. The face of war is changing. Ukraine is aware of the technological revolution on the battlefield with respect to unmanned aircraft, land vehicles, and sea vehicles, and we need to pay attention to Ukraine. That said, the West has strength at its disposal if we will realize it and use it, and Russia has severe weaknesses that we can exploit.
I have another question in terms of this scenario. If Putin decides to escalate in Europe, will the fifth article of NATO Charter work?
Well, an excellent question. And there is, I believe, a debate within the Trump administration about what this means. There are people in the Trump administration who are not interested in NATO, who regard Article 5 as excessive and wish to reinterpret Article 5 to weaken it. This would be dangerous. This would invite greater conflict. These people need to understand the lessons of the 20th century. But there they are. However, they are not the only group within the administration. I think that there are others who understand that failure to respond to Russian aggression would make Trump look weak. And if there's one thing Trump doesn't want, it is to look weak. I think that if Russia escalated against NATO members, if it sent little green men or fighter planes or drones to actually start attacking using weapons to destroy infrastructure or attack military or civilian targets, I think that NATO would respond. And I think that it would be a mistake for Putin to count on Trump being passive. But of course, the Trump administration sends mixed messages, and this is not helpful. It's not helpful to NATO. It's not helpful to security.
How should the United States and European partners recalibrate sanctions regimes and economic leverage to pressure Moscow toward a credible settlement without driving Russia into closer alignment with non-Western partners like China or others?
Well, I'm not terribly impressed by the argument that we have to restrain ourselves from putting full pressure on Russia because that would drive them closer to China. That should not be a consideration. We should be putting more pressure on Russia, and we have perfectly reasonable options to do so. The United States could target the shadow fleet. We could sanction all of it, and we could take other measures to prevent it from operating to circumvent the oil price cap. We could lower the price of the oil price cap. We could go after secondary, third country suppliers and enablers of the shadow fleet. We could launch a full financial embargo against Russia with certain exceptions. There are plenty of escalatory options we have in the financial realm. We should take them.
How would you characterize Putin's current phase, current strategic point?
Well, I think Putin is aggressive. He seeks to restore the Russian Empire, starting with Ukraine, and he is behaving rationally within his frame of reference. That is, with respect to Ukraine, he knows what the deal on the table looks like, mostly. It's a ceasefire more or less in place, plus security for Ukraine short of NATO membership. He knows what that looks like, but he wants more. And there is a reasonable chance that he could get more by simply pushing the Trump administration and hoping for a break in European solidarity. For instance, if the German Alternative for Deutschland party succeeds, or Le Pen's party in France, you could have a weakening of European solidarity with Ukraine. Putin is counting on that. And it is not completely foolish of him to do so. Therefore, his hard line, his stubbornness, and refusal to negotiate in good faith has a rational basis. But it also means that if we put more pressure on Russia and consolidate our strength and make sure that Putin cannot play for time without penalty, we have a chance of changing his calculation. George Kennan, the first great American Sovietologist, said that the Kremlin is impervious to the logic of reason, but it is highly sensitive to the logic of force, meaning if you negotiate with Russia from a position of strength, you can sometimes succeed.
Do you have any predictions or assumptions about any time frames when Putin is ready for concessions, any concessions?
He will not consider negotiating in good faith until there is greater pressure put on him. It's not a question of time, it's a question of the balance of forces as he sees it. The sooner we decide, the sooner President Trump decides to put more pressure on Ukraine, on Russia for the sake of Ukraine, the sooner Putin may decide to negotiate in good faith.
Daniel, thank you very much for your time, for this interview, and have a good day.
Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Дякую.